Hi, this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications. The secret to brand growth isn't bigger budgets or louder ads. It's the associations people carry in their minds. The strongest brands aren't built on slogans, they're built on memory. Today, I'm joined by Ulli Appelbaum, award-winning strategist and author of The Science of Brand Associations, Win Minds, Win Markets, to reveal why Volvo equals safety, why KitKat still owns the brake, and how you can engineer the same kind of sticky, money-making associations for your brand. Welcome to the show, Ulli.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Thanks for having me, Laurie. Very excited to be on your show.
Oh my gosh, such a great, amazing topic today.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, could you share a little bit about your career journey and what really led to you writing The Science of Brand Associations?
Absolutely. Thanks for asking. So, as you can clearly hear, I'm German, but I'm based in the US. I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've lived here for the last 20 or so years. Career-wise, I did a traditional career in account planning in different agencies around the world. So the strategy group of some of the top agencies, whether I was in Germany, in Hungary, or for the last 20 years in the US. And I had the opportunity to work for clients like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Philip Morris, Skoda in Europe, Kellogg's in the US for brands like Hallmark, Wrigley.
Wow.
So I'm lucky enough to have really great training through great clients. And 14 years ago, to be honest, we were living in Los Angeles. My wife was expecting our third child. And my wife is from Minnesota. So we decided, you know what, we're going to do a lifestyle change, come back to Minnesota where her family is. So we have a social network to support, our growing family. Minneapolis at the time was a great place to raise family. And so I decided to start my own company when I joined here, when we moved back here. And that was first the Trousers Then the Shoes, which is a consulting practice, brand consulting practice. And we do research, strategy development, innovation, training, all these kind of things. And I've been lucky enough to be able to do it for both small startup entrepreneurs to global companies with multi-billion dollars around the world, and have been enjoying it so far. And to be honest, one thing I love about my job is like I learn every day, every year. I learn something new. And a couple of years ago, I wrote the brand positioning workbook, which basically explores different type of associations that you can use to position a brand. But as I was writing this book, or after I wrote the book, I realized, okay, there isn't much information out there about brand associations. And
Right.
when you look at Amazon and you search brand association, not one single book has brand associations either in its title or focuses exclusively on brand associations. And yet, when you listen to some of the thought leader in marketing, when you look at the work that some of the global research companies do, they all deal with one form or another of brand association. They might call it slightly differently. So that at first I was like, okay, no one wrote a book. Is it really worth it? But then I realized how deeply important it is to building brand. And so I decided to be the one to write the book. And here we are.
Well, I tell you, and it's fantastic. And I think your experience dovetails so beautifully into why this book was written. And I really appreciate the context that you've just provided. So let's get started right where your book begins, with the idea that brand associations are the missing link in marketing strategy today.
Mhm.
You called brand associations the single most important concept in marketing. Why do you think practitioners have overlooked that for so long?
That is a great question, and I've tried to answer that every time ever since I wrote the book. And I think that the reason is that brand associations are often used in the work of some of the big leaders, my thought leaders in the category, as a means to an end.
Mm,
So I traced it back to a gentleman called David Aker or Kevin Keller. Those were like the gurus of brand equities in the late 80s, early 90s. And they already used brand association to explain the concept of brand equity, sort of like this substantial value that is provided beyond a product. But they talk about brand associations and they talk about the criteria brand associations need to fulfill, but it was always in the context of brand equity. And then, other companies, other big thought leaders like the Ehrenberg Bass Institute in Australia, who wrote this very influential book called How Brands Grow or How Brands Grow Too, they talk about mental availability. And they use that as the mental availability being the fact that a brand comes to mind at the moment of purchase being one of the key success criteria of a brand. Well, mental availability is only a fresh, strong, dense network of brand association. So they
right.
always talked about it in the context of something else. No one really talked about it focusing exclusively on brand association themselves.
So, in your mind, is the brand association truly how the consumer, the buyer, positions themselves within that brand?
It's a great question. Actually, a friend of mine called brand associations also the operating system of a brand. When you think about it, what is a brand? A brand is simply what you have memorized about a specific offering. Let's say ketchup. Everything you associate with ketchup, whether it's the taste, whether it's the color scheme and the brand assets, whether it's the family picnics you had or the family barbecues you had, the emotions associated with that, the experiences associated with that, all these things are memories that are stored in your brain. Without
Right.
these memories, the brand doesn't exist. And prior to this call, I thought about, are you, for example, familiar with a brand called Palladium Boots?
Right.
Do you know Palladium Boots? Does it ring a bell to you?
It does not ring a bell.
See, that's what I mean. So for
Yeah.
you, Palladium is not a brand. For me, it's one of my favorite shoe brands, which has a lot of history. But not not having anything memorized, it means zero brand building in your
Right.
mind. Um,
And the issue is without a brand association, you can't build the awareness
That's
that
exactly right. Because
yeah,
awareness for what? Not
exactly.
only do you need an association, and an important part of this network you build is the brand assets, which we often talk about, the logo, the character, color scheme that you associate with that. Because without these brand assets, you have nothing to hook your meaning onto.
Right.
Um, and that's why it's so important to build those in a strong fashion. And that's what I do in the book. I show what makes strong networks and how to build them basically for brands to succeed.
What do you think? I mean, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. And how much control does a brand have in creating the associations that are needed to create the equity that does lead to the acquisition, which does lead to the repeat business?
Mhm. Again, great question. So I do not, there's this popular saying of the brand, the consumer owns the brand. And
Right.
I think that is absolutely false because your job as a brand marketer, a brand steward, is to determine what are the three or four associations I want to create. It's basically your positioning, right?
Right.
But to be able to do that, you need to understand how do consumers perceive my brand? What is their current experience? So in the case I mentioned earlier, like the Palladium boots, you had no experience, you have no perception, you have no memory of this brand. So I can literally devise a network of association that I want.
Mm.
Let's take another brand, a Chevrolet. I don't know if you have experience with Chevrolet, but if you're like my in-laws are sort of like a Chevy family, so
Right.
they have a long history of Chevy. If I want to appeal to those people, I need to understand what is it they associate with Chevy already,
Right.
and what can I use from these memories, or what new memory can I add to make Chevy more appealing and more attractive to them, or get them to renew their interest in Chevy. For that, I need to understand what is in their mind already. Now, I can only do that if I'm honest. So, I cannot go and say, oh, Chevy is the best sports car brand out there. It's like, no, because most people associate, trucks with them. So coming up with something like sports car, there's a disconnect here.
Right.
Or I can say it's, if I claim something that is inconsistent with what consumers currently have in their brain, then I'm going to create a friction and consumers are going to push back. And that's when you often have the big backslashes out there. So,
Right. Thank you for that. I think a lot about how it makes you feel. Years
mhm,
ago, there was a great denim line within Ann Taylor, which I
mhm,
know you have no brand association to as well.
mhm,
And I bought these jeans for 10 years.
mhm,
It made me feel good. I think they made me look better.
mhm,
Because of that, I felt more positive.
mhm.
I felt pretty, all these sort of things that you feel when you put something like that on, or in the case of Chevrolet, how you feel when you drive the car down the street.
Yeah.
And Taylor discontinued the line.
Oh.
And they lost my business like
Mhm,
20 years ago because of it,
mhm.
because I could not find, it took me months to find
Yeah.
another brand that made me feel the way that specific model of jeans made me feel.
Yeah.
And it was truly something that really, really bothered me until I found that new brand. And then,
Mhm.
brand loyalty
Kick back in.
and
Yeah.
it kicked back in.
Yeah.
So that's how important this is.
Yeah.
That's how important this is, and why planning, why brand development, why brand strategy, why positioning, why the messaging, everything that we're talking about right now is so crucial to
Yes.
setting up a company to succeed.
Yeah. And you're making a brilliant point that is often ignored in marketing, but there's more and more research to prove the importance is I'm sure the Ann Taylor jeans fit well and made you look good physically, just like from a pure physicality.
Right.
But you highlight how it made you feel. And that's
Exactly.
what most brand managers forget is they just don't just want a brand with functional elements. They want brands that elicit an emotional response. And
Yeah.
why? Because science shows you that if you are emotionally invested something, or if something elicits an emotional response, your brain memorizes it harder and for longer. So there's literally science behind that. It's not just, making people feel good for the sake of it. There is a strategic rationale behind it that most people neglect.
I was at a client site in Milwaukee a couple weeks ago, and this incredible lady was helping me navigate the coffee maker.
Uh-huh.
And her perfume happened to be the perfume that my grandmother
Yes.
wore.
Mhm.
And so I, immediately felt such a belonging to this individual because of a scent that my grandmother wore, until she was in her 90s. And
Yeah.
that is what we're talking about. That is how important Uli's book is and
Mhm.
why you all need to run out and grab it and buy it. So let's talk. You compare definitions of brands to the story of the blind men and the elephant. Can
Mhm.
you share that metaphor and how it applies to marketers?
Of course. So the metaphor is a really old one. I looked it up this morning again. It's like over 2,500 years old. You think about that, and yet it's still relevant as always. And I think initially it was published in a scripture from Buddha.
Ah,
And basically, the story goes that a group of blind men come into touch or encounter an elephant, and they all touch the elephant and try to figure out what is this thing. Obviously, they're blind. So the first one is, touches the trunk and say, "Ooh, an elephant is basically like a big snake, because of the trunk." The other one touches a leg and said, "No, no, no, it's not a snake. It's like a tree trunk. That's what an elephant is." And the third one touches the ear and says, "Oh, this is not like a fluffy thing. It's like a butterfly type thing, if I remember well." And so they all are convinced about their interpretation of what they have felt or experienced or touched and start to argue with each other, and get into this big argument. Oh, no, no, you're wrong. It's not a tree trunk. It's a snake. It's like, no, you're an idiot. I feel something very different. And the point of this, there's a much deeper religious meaning behind it, but at the core, what we take out of it nowadays is it's really just how your limited experience shapes your perception of things, but if you push it a bit further, also shapes your conviction of your limited perception. So, what does that mean? In the world of marketing, in the world of politics, we see it everywhere, right? But in the world of marketing, this is, I'm a big fan of brand purpose. I'm not, but imagine a person that looks at the world through the brand purpose lens. Everything else doesn't matter. Or I'm all about culture, or old school marketers would be all about functional benefits, and they'll all be passionate about their view, and they're still just focusing on the trunk or the leg or the ear. They don't have the big picture of what a brand actually is, which is what the book of brand association is meant to be. So it's really supposed to be I try to write it not focusing on my opinion, or there's a bit of my experience, of course, in there, but it's all science backed or evidence based. So nothing in there is made up or an expression of my conviction. It's really just facts about brands and how they're built, how they're created, and how to maintain them. So, yeah.
And that's where the science gets real fascinating, right?
Mhm.
What actually happens in the brain when someone recalls a brand?
So one simple analogy would be, for example, imagine a firework, right? If you light a fuse and that leads to a firework. The fuse, the trigger, would be the encounter with a brand asset. You see the McDonald's arches, you see the shape of the Coca-Cola bottles. And actually, recent research shows that out of the different brand assets a brand has at its disposal, the logo is not the most important one. So, like in the case of McDonald's, the arches might be more important than the logo itself. But
Right.
what it does is when you encounter that, you have like a firework that explodes in your brain, in a sense, that brings back all the memories you have about that specific brands, good or bad. So it literally, you lighting a fuse that brings all these memories together, or the emotions you had, or reminds you of an experience you had a while back that changed the way you feel about the brand. So it literally just activates this network and lights it up like a little firework. And that means that, as you can see, a firework has like different things that explode. These
Mhm.
things that explode are in psychology called nodes, which is pieces of information. It can be an emotion, it can be a scent, it can be a color, it can be a need state that is awoken or awoken.
I think they're both correct.
So this is really how it works. But that only works if this network of associations is strong, is present, and is congruent.
Yeah.
Then you can light. It's as if the rod doesn't. For the firework to work, the rod needs to really connect all these elements. If there is no rod connecting them, you cannot get the firework to start. So in my case, you say Chevy, and it's like a little poof going on in the air, and no any maybe association with my in-laws,
Hmm.
but nothing else. And Taylor, for you, the same. It's like, depending on what goes off in your brain.
Well, and I think what's really interesting here is when something negative does happen, how a brand can overcome that negativity, and sometimes the length in which it takes to overcome that negativity. And let's face facts, every brand out there makes mistakes.
Yeah.
We were in Omaha seeing one of our daughters at college for Parents Weekend, went to a McDonald's. It was quite honestly the worst
Hmm.
hamburger we had ever had. Like, how can a kitchen make a mistake with such a process-oriented business with a
Hmm.
hamburger?
Hmm.
And because we have so many positive experiences leading up to that, a lifelong of positive experiences, we will go back.
Yeah.
But if you are a new brand in market or an existing brand, and let's say you went through a time period where quality was suffering and delivery time was suffering,
Hmm.
to overcome that can take a much longer time if the customer even decides to
To
stay with
come
you.
back. Yeah. Hmm.
So the brand associations are what really trigger the decision on whether or not I'm going to flee or fight.
That's exactly right. So what strong brand disposition do is they predispose you, right? Either you like it or you don't like it. Doesn't matter. It's a positive or a negative thing. But if you are predisposed, like you mentioned with McDonald's, because of all your experience over the year, many, many years, one mistake may lead to a disappointment, but it may not change your opinion overall. You're like, oh, that was probably a mistake. Let's say you have come with a, I don't know, let's take a, a friend of yours from Patagonia, which doesn't have McDonald's, and they would have been at with you at that McDonald's at the same time. They
Yeah.
would just have experienced the negative, and they would say, "What kind of restaurant is this? Why does Laurie take me even here?" Because he doesn't have all this positive predisposition based on his strong network. They would have a very different expectation or experience with the brand. And the point here is an important one for brands that make mistakes. We tend to dismiss the heritage and the equity of the brand way too quickly. Oh,
Right.
there was a bad experience with the restaurant. We got to change everything. Um, no, the best thing a marketer can do is like to thoroughly understand what equity elements do we have that are positive, that are strong, that we've spent 100 years building, that we either need to reframe or add to them or build on or evolve, as opposed to discard everything that was done in the past and then try to build something new where you basically start from scratch again. So
Right.
a typical example is Heinz ketchup, which I absolutely love because it's so simple, right? Heinz, fantastic brand, beautiful play with their brand assets. But a complaint that often came was to say, oh, the pouring takes way too long,
Ah,
when you try to pour it out of the bottle. Now, a marketer could say, you know what, that's a problem consumers have. We're going to liquefy it, add more water to it, make it more liquid, and then people can pour it way quicker. Um, Heinz didn't do that. They said the pour is so slow because of the tomatoes we have in there and the fact that they're only quality ingredients in a certain consistency. So they don't try to change a problem in this case. They build, and I would say this is part of Heinz equity, the slow pour, but give it meaning to it. So now every time I pour a ketchup, and it takes a while, I'm like, well, it's because of the quality of the product.
yeah.
Continue to
Well,
shake the bottle.
what incredible positioning that led to great messaging that led to great brand equity. The other thing that I think Heinz did that was very, very smart is they did look at form and function as well.
Yes.
They did take a look at the bottle in
Yeah.
which the product is served, and they thought, okay, there could be also a different way
Yes.
of serving this, meaning, okay, we'll just, you can store it upside down. Here's, instead of a glass bottle,
Yeah.
here's a squeeze bottle, and it's going to come out a little bit easier. So they looked at it from both sides, which I think is really smart.
Is very brilliant because they didn't change the composition of the product
Exactly.
itself. They changed the delivery. And I think so that's true in terms of like the functionality. It's also true in terms of communication. I don't know if you've seen this campaign. I think it was done in Canada where they tilted the label of Heinz on the ketchup bottle to a certain degree. I forgot what percentage, but it basically means that if you have the bottle in front of you, the label is distorted. But if you turn the bottle so that the label turns straight, you've achieved the perfect pouring angle of your product.
I
So
love it.
you just twist the bottle so that the logo becomes vertical or horizontal, however you want to look at it, and that shows you the perfect angle. Again, they didn't change the product itself, they changed the communication of it or the experience of the bottle. It's just brilliant, but it takes a strong marketing brain to achieve that or to do that.
It really does. I mean, talk about thinking outside of the box. Whoa.
Yes.
Um, so I think all too often brands and especially early stage brands try to be all things to all people. They are throwing so much at you that the buyer has nowhere to focus. And this is where brand confusion really starts to take shape.
Mhm.
How do marketers decide which associations they should focus on?
Mhm. So in the book, I have a series of, I think, 6 or 7 principles. But at the core, Laurie, it boils down to basic human understanding of marketing is for people to remember it and the associations you want to focus in, it needs to be relevant and important to you. It sounds silly, but if it's not important or relevant to you or address issues that are relevant to you, it doesn't make it's completely pointless. And it also needs to feel, so especially small brands, they only grow by stealing customers from other brands in the category.
Yeah.
So you need to tell your consumers, why would you pick me, take a little risk on me, compared to the brand you are used to buy? Why am I better than your competition that's worth taking that little risk? And why am I different from competition for you to take that little risk, whether it's the same price point or a higher price point? So as basic as it sounds, that's number one. And the number two is really, again, the point you made so brilliantly earlier is elicit an emotional response
Right.
or associate something with your brand that no one else in the category does. If you only do these two things, you can forget about the six. Well, I wouldn't forget about them, but those are the two more important ones to then build on the six other ones I mentioned in the book. But if and it sounds obvious, right? But I hear so many clients saying things like, "Oh, this benefit is a category entry point." But it's
Mhm.
like the worst thing you can see. An example I mentioned is I worked in eco-friendly detergents, the detergent category not too long ago, and you have like 20 new eco-friendly brands out there that all tell you about the environment, that all tell you about, how they're saving the world. First of all, they're all telling the same or similar story, but what they forget to point out is that, hey, our eco-friendly detergent cleans as
Yeah.
well as regular detergent. And that sounds stupid, right? But if you understand consumers and barriers to purchase, this is the biggest concern they have towards eco-friendly um, detergents. So you need to tell them we wash as clean as the big guys, or under certain circumstances, our product is as parity with everyone else. Hence, our ESG benefits can help you decide. Most brands forget to do that.
They
And
do.
and so therefore the consumer is like, okay, great, you're telling me you're saving, dolphins or trees,
Yeah,
but what about my clothes? Are they going to be clean?
exactly.
And
Yeah. It's the wrong purpose. You mentioned parity, and one thing that this agency very much believes in when we're doing a competitive analysis and strategic insights regarding,
Mhm,
the buyer profiles is what we call it is a POD grid. So points of parity, points of differentiation. That's where most brands stop. We then take it to points of distinction because there are still points of differentiation, detergent being one of them,
yes.
that truly is no different than anyone else. I mean, the basics of it is it does need to clean my clothes.
Yeah.
The distinction, I think, is where we really get into a lot of what we're talking about from a brand association standpoint. How does having clean clothes that don't scratch and don't itch you and are soft when they come out of the washing machine or
Mhm,
dryer, and by the way, also save dolphins, make you
mhm,
feel
yeah,
compared to just stopping at point number one there?
that's right.
And that is where I think a lot of brands just don't think through it. And dare I say, a lot of very young brands and very naive entrepreneurs totally mistake the power of marketing and really
Yes.
what it can achieve when it's done well.
Yeah. And that is a very true. And just to build on that, you see that even beyond the positioning itself, right? Often I see they want to position the brand based on their own belief. I want to do
Yeah,
good, so I'm going to position the brand as wanting to do something good.
yeah,
And it may be relevant to some consumers, but consumers want to know, "Oh, there's a great, you're doing good, but what are you doing for me exactly? Don't forget to mention that." And
yeah.
the other big thing I see them do is, especially D2C brand, direct to consumer brands, is they build a database of 100,000 buyers and they continue to bombard them with emails.
Mhm.
So, how many detergents do I actually need? If I wash 5 times a week, I have a big family, I still just need 25 packs a month. I don't need 250 and don't need to be reminded every 2 days to buy more. So they tend to focus on their existing customers rather than to try to acquire new customers, which would be their way to grow. So yeah.
I love this discussion so much. I feel like we could actually talk for, I don't know, maybe a day on all of this. Um, so let's move into strategies for building strong brand association networks.
Mhm.
Of the 9 strategies that you outline in the book, which ones do marketers often overlook?
I hate to admit it, but all of them, consistently all of them. And
Yeah.
let me mean what. First of all, I see a lot of companies are not united in their understanding of what they're trying to achieve. So they're
Right.
not. You ask five different stakeholders, what is your brand? What does your brand stand for? And you get five different answers.
Mhm.
If you don't have internal clarity, how do you expect consumers to be clear about what you're doing? So that's number one. And number two is often also understanding the consumer. We're cutting short on research. Now, research nowadays doesn't have to be expensive, but
Right.
making guesses about what the consumer is, who the consumer. No, you can research it for very little money and get turn hypotheses into facts. That's the way I often talk to my client about it when we do our preliminary research. The other syndrome you see is you're not maximizing your brand and the touch points of your brand. And the name of the game is consistency. Consistency of messaging, consistency of brand assets, of look and feel at every single touch point. And I think historically there was this belief in advertising agencies like people don't like advertising, people don't like brands. So push away the logo, tell a story that is dramatic and that just reveals in the last 2 seconds what the brand is. But science shows us it's the complete opposite. Show your brand assets at least 7 times in a TV commercial. Exploit your brand assets at every single touch point. You cannot repeat it enough. And those are mistakes brands do as often as well. And another one is simply change their communication too often. You have a new
Right.
CMO coming in. Ooh, I got to fire my
First
agency.
thing they're going to do, change
That's
for
right.
change sake.
That's right. And these are the worst things. And there is data to support all this, Lori. The thing is, we don't even need to believe.
Yeah.
You can look at the data of what is effective and what isn't, and just follow those principles. And that's what part of it you'll discover in the book.
Yeah, you mentioned consistency, and I think it's so important because, there's consistency with what marketing can push out in the market, regarding, advertising and PR and, all those
Yeah.
components, right? But then there's also consistency specifically in B2B and how a sales team represents the brand
Yes.
that ties into what marketing is already pushing out. And I think that is where there is a big disconnect in many, many brands out there, is that sales is not really connected to the messaging that marketing is pushing out, which creates inconsistency, which creates a disconnect, which creates market confusion, and which what puts, it puts all that good work really, pushes it aside. And quite frankly, the board isn't happy because the revenue's, not being
Yes.
achieved. So that is an area that I caution a lot of our brands on, and why marketing and sales with every brand that we work on is really connected at the hip,
It needs to
because
be,
of the
yes.
importance with that.
Yes. And I even go a step further. I think you're completely correct. I even go a step further is, again, data shows that I think if I'm well, 60% of all buyers, B2B buyers, have researched you before they reached out to you, have talked to their peers about you
I think it
before
might be
they,
90%.
or even higher,
Yeah,
yes. So before they even call someone and say, hey, could we have a credential presentation or a product demo, they know already so much about you. And
yeah,
I've talked to a lot of them over the last few years, and the biggest complaint I hear is like, I have a new sales team coming in that gives me a generic credential stack on how great their product is without asking, what do I know already? What are my real problems that I'm trying to solve? And what are the questions I have coming to the table? And that is a whole other door that you can open
yeah.
to help
There are a lot
B2B
of doors we
companies.
can open, but we don't have time. Could you quickly, with that said, share the Jägermeister story and what it teaches about building brand associations through experiences?
So one of the strongest thing you can do as a brand, and it's more difficult in packaged goods, but you can do it as well. It's to create unique, memorable experiences. That is really what, and again, the science shows that if you have an experience that engages all your senses, that has an emotional component to it, the imprint of the brand, so the changes in your memory will be bigger than if you don't have that. And Jägermeister, as everyone knows, Jägermeister, it's an old German brand that was initially very niche, focusing on older gentlemen that like to hunt. Jägermeister is like the master of
Yeah.
hunting, but that had a sort of like a digestive function. So no one in Germany drinks that as a cocktail or as something like that. It's literally you ate too much, you feel a bit heavy, you have a little shot of Jägermeister to help with the digestion. And
Ah,
when it was imported in the US, the gentleman, a very successful business entrepreneur, decided initially that's what the Germans in the US started to use Jägermeister as well, just like what they heard from their home country. But he said, you know what, I want to target young people. So instead of advertising, he took what he called Jägerettes. So, young, attractive women that went into bars in college towns and that handed out shots of Jägermeister.
oh,
Here we go. So,
yeah.
you imagine you're there with your buddies and you're having fun at the bar, and even a big group, men and women, doesn't matter. And you have these attractive young women that come and give you shots of Jägermeister. One, of course, you're going to do that. Two, it's going to be fun. It's going to be interactive. It's going to be something that leaves an impression. And in parallel to that, which I thought was a brilliant move, is they had little dispensers that they gave to the bars that ensured that you get a perfect shot of Jägermeister, but very cold. Now, the
Oh,
interesting
wow.
thing is when Jägermeister is you drink it at room temperature, the flavor is much stronger and frankly less pleasant than if you drink it cold. So for me, I thought it was a great way to reduce one of the negatives of the product. But then, so it started to spread in college towns as sort of like the party beverage. But then I think it was the late 90s, Red Bull entered the US market, and someone in the bar had the brilliant idea to create the Jäger bomb, which is basically you drop a shot of
That's what
Jägermeister.
it is.
That's exactly what it is in a Red Bull. And so this initial momentum it gained exploded. So imagine you're a student, you're with friends, you're partying during the weekend, and you get exposed to Jägermeister, the Jäger bomb, the Jägerette, the cold shots and stuff like. This burns into your brand so
Yeah.
much harder than any piece of advertising. And throughout the years, they've tried to do, communication and association with concerts, with sports. Nothing works as fine as, being half buzzed in a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning and
Well,
taking shots with your friends.
yeah,
So,
exactly. I mean, it's at that point that it becomes an experience,
mhm.
which creates those emotional
Yeah,
associations so important. Becomes
that's exactly right.
that memory is, of those shared experiences with friends in this situation,
Yeah. And
are
ask young people, about Jägermeister, and they immediately light up because, again, coming back to my fireworks, because why? It remembers them of their time at university or at college or studying or partying with their friends, which are all positive emotions.
I had my Jaeger days and they were fabulous. I had a lot of fun. Um, We are running out of time, so I'm going to speed us up a little
Mhm,
bit. In the book, you talk about, we're talking right now about some of the mistakes that brands
mhm.
make. In this situation, Jaeger really was not standing the test of time. They needed, to interject something that would create an excitement in the
Yeah,
market. They did that with a co-op with another
yeah.
brand. You talk about 16 reasons brand fail in the book. Can you just give us a few of those very quickly?
Oh, again, it's a long list. So you have everything from lack of internal alignment, lack of understanding, lack of clarity on what you're trying to achieve, lack of consistency, lack of, every brand has different touch points with its consumers. I believe I'm not a big fan of having a very exhaustive customer journey analysis. I'm a big fan of having an analysis of the touch points and understanding those where you can create these surprising,
Yeah.
high impact experiences. That's what really matters. Um, Another big one, which you see, is the lack of using brand assets. And for small brands need to invest in brand assets. They need to build them. Large brands can harvest them, but the brand asset is what I mentioned earlier with my fireworkers. It's the fuse. If I don't have a fuse that lights up all these associations, I don't really have much to communicate or to remember consumers of. So those are all mistakes that brands make. Changing too often, changing too quickly. Those are all mistakes brands make. So as I said, I've witnessed clients doing any of these mistakes. Not every client doing every of them, but a lot of clients doing quite a few of them. And
Yeah. And
not out of,
half the battle is figuring out what those mistakes are as well, which
yes.
is why there's so much value in picking up the book and reading it, with these 16 different
Yeah.
situations that really can help people self-define, quite frankly.
And if I may plug in, Laurie, real quick, it's on my website, on my homepage, firstthetrousers.com. I posted a little online survey that is based on these 16 principles. So all a brand steward has to do is answer 15, 20 questions. And a couple of minutes later, he or she's going to receive an email that is going to give them a perfect analysis. Well, it's still not perfect. It's a beta version, but that will give them a complete analysis of, hey, you don't understand your client, your customers well enough, or you're not aligned, or you understand your customers and you're doing the right thing, you are positioned properly, but you don't execute it. So it gives you a very quick assessment of your own strengths and weaknesses and tips on how to overcome those weaknesses and maintain those strengths. So it's
That's
just a
awesome.
very quick tool, and it's completely free. So
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
sure.
So you've given us a clear playbook for building and repairing associations. So let's wrap up by connecting this back to how marketers can apply it day to day. You emphasize that marketers often guess their associations. How should they validate them instead?
Well, it's like alcoholism, right? It's first you got to realize that you are guessing.
Yeah.
Um, when you talk to a client, and that's the point I make in the book, and I ask you, Laurie, what do people associate with your brand, your business, and your podcast, and your whole persona? You're probably going to give me 20 different associations that are probably correct to some extent because it's your internal perspective and you are so close to them. A consumer might think, is it Laurie, this really smart marketing person that does this awesome podcast? Two associations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Compared to the 12 you may have. But those are the two important ones you want to create. So just asking consumers, and you can do it in focus groups, you can do it at grocery stores. It doesn't have to be highly scientific, complex research project. Is what I said earlier, it's turning hypotheses a company might have into facts. So people may think, oh, people really hate, I don't know, XYZ for a brand. You know, they have a really negative association. And you ask them and you realize it's actually no, they don't care. It's for them, it's not an issue. Or you think that, you know, the mechanism of the opening of your package is like super smart and super cool and really makes a difference. And consumers would tell you, I didn't even notice that there is a different opening mechanism. So it really helps you ground what you think into facts, which I think is the. And then once we are aligned on the facts, let's say in our case, you two, Laurie's a brilliant marketer and has a fantastic podcast that is really useful. Then we can say, okay, that's what you stand for, really. How can we build on that? How can we build on that to appeal to a new audience, to reinforce this impression? But then we worked with facts. We don't speak about, you know, the color of your shoes or I worked for a design company where the founder always had different color pants, trousers, you know, so irrelevant if we haven't nailed what's really important in helping you and helping consumer understand who you are.
Yeah, so many words of wisdom in this discussion today, Uli. Before we close, we have one last question for you that we
Mhm.
ask each and every one of our guests. We launched Better At series this year to help marketers sharpen their everyday skills that make a big difference. Things like listening, collaborating, prioritizing, and communicating. What's one better at that you'd like to share with our audience today that they can take and learn from day in and day out?
I would just say, and that's the most difficult thing to do, change the way you look at your marketing and your brands. Think about, and usually when I do that with my client, at first they look at me, but take a whiteboard, take a piece of paper and draw three, four circles. These are the associations my brand has, nothing else. And look at everything you do, your strategy, your execution, your communication, your partnerships through those lens. Do we help strengthen these four bubbles? Do we dilute those four bubbles? Has it nothing to do? So it literally changed the perspective at which you use to look at brand. And you'll see at first it takes, I'm very used to do that so now. So,
Right.
but at first it takes a bit of effort because you literally change your worldview on marketing. But once you have done it, you notice how simple it actually is and how efficient you are because you only focus on things that are relevant, not on discussing theories, philosophies that have nothing to do with building your strong brands. So,
Relevancy is a very, very important better
yes.
that's for sure. What is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
The best way is to look me up on LinkedIn, Ulli Appelbaum, or just Google Ulli Appelbaum. You'll find me pretty much everywhere, or to go to my website, which is firstthetrousers.com, but there is a little minus sign in between each word. So first minus the minus trousers.com. And that's also where you'll find this little online survey.
That's great. Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that. And if you'd like to get in contact with me, please connect on LinkedIn as well, Lori Sartorius Jones. Ulli Appelbaum, what a gift. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for everything that you've shared with me. I feel like a smarter person because of it today.
Thank you.
And our audience, we appreciate your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thank you so much for having me. And it takes the right question to bring out the right insight. So thank you for your great questions.
Thank you, Ulli.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.